It matters because you're part of a team, and I think for your mind to change around how I drive this team forward, rather than me being told to drive the team forward, is totally different. And you need to communicate on the field when you're under pressure every single time. So if you're shy, if you have something to say, I've got to be able to think positively, creatively, come up with a solution, give it to the team in a 15-second message, and then move on. If we don't create solution-focused men, then we'll get to full time. The game's over. We've made 5 mistakes that could have been fixed on the run. Because, what we do as coaches is hugely overstated. We're watching the game just like that. We can maybe have an influence at half time. For 5 minutes, we might change the course of the tactics, but good rugby teams that I've been involved with, they can do that in a heartbeat.
Tom, Coventry, thank you so much for taking the time. Great to see you on screen.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Peter.
How was your time down south, Dunedin? You would have been excited to get back and get back down south.
Yeah, it always brings back fond memories returning to Dunedin. Unfortunately, it was a Sunday night, so the town wasn't probably as buoyant as we'd like it to be. But yeah, we had a great time down there, and obviously the result went our way. I thought we played some pretty good rugby and nearly lost it, but won it back.
Yeah. I want to speak about Moana Pasifika straight away. But where did you flat when you lived down in Dunedin, just out of curiosity?
I moved between 3 flats. I started in Queen Street my first couple of years, and then I ended up with a few friends from Orana. We ended up in the St. David Street flat right at the top of the hill called the White House. And in my last year, we ended up in Gladstone Road, which is out back of the Northeast Valley there, and I've flatted with 5 of my best friends, and we had a great time out there as well. So they all had very special memories.
Moana Pasifika, awesome result in the stadium. What a win! What an arty grubber. It looks like when I see Vision in the coaching box, geez, you guys look like you're having a fun season.
Yeah, it's actually surprising, isn't it? Because it goes against my usual character. I'm usually pretty straight, but the energy in our box is infectious. It's hard not to get caught up in it, and I think we're enjoying the moment just as much as the players are. So you'll see plenty of cheering and yahooing and just enjoying the moment, and I think that's a good thing. I've had a few of my friends comment about that, about the animation that I've been showing in the box is a bit different than what I usually have. But as you get older, I think you'll learn to value those little wins and those small moments. So why not celebrate them with the players?
And you've been with this team for a couple of seasons now. What's changed? What have you seen the development areas, and where's the growth come from?
Yeah, we had a really good review at the end of last year, and look back actually at the 3 years that the club had been around, and we spent a little bit of time working on our fitness levels. We invited boys to come back in early. We started in October. It was voluntary; they didn't have to come in, but some of them were shoulder tapped, particularly the boys that didn't move off to international rugby. So we had that opportunity to invite them to come, and coaches were available. Had our trainers on the grass, so we had some really good buy-in there. That's the first thing that changed. We've still got some work to do in that area, but it was nice to have 20-odd players training through the October month into the start when we assemble in November. The other thing is we've really worked hard on is simplifying our game, understanding what we're good at, profiling our team, and then looking at what's going to work for the side. What are the skill sets they bring? And based around some of the fitness levels, we've probably played a lot of rugby in the wrong parts of the field. So tactically, I think we've been a bit smarter this year. And if you look at the stats and compare yourself to other teams, the teams that are competent and generally winning matches, they're very focused on the right parts of the field. And it can look good running around in the middle of the field and trying for opportunities to score, but the teams that are really calculated and get themselves in the right parts of the field are the teams that are successful. So we've taken a lesson out of the successful teams that have been winning, and not always have we been able to replicate that, but by and large, I think that's been a big improvement. And then some of the off-field habits, Peter. I think we've put a bit of emphasis on being a good pro, how much time you need to do preparing for a week, for a day within a week, what game day looks like, just the habits that you would expect anybody coming into a professional environment would have. I think that's been a big change. And then obviously Artie coming in, and it's just added some self-belief that you have a World Player of the Year coming into our environment and choosing to play for us. It's just grown the arm and leg on these boys, and you can't put anything on top of no self-belief. So regardless of what we do, the first priority is to create some self-belief. Now, we can tell them all we like, but when you end up with a player like Artie coming in and leading by example, that's a huge statement for us and for rugby in general, I think.
How did you get that off-field messaging across? I think when you're, say, in one of the biggest Super Rugby franchises, or you go through a rugby academy, you have flatmates, you're all in it together, and you kind of monkey see, monkey do. You step in, you see, oh, right, that's how a pro prepares for training. That's what he's having for breakfast. Oh, he's getting some notes down before training. So you see all that stuff. I would say that the Moana boys' training age was pretty low, right? When they're coming in, the professional age of the athlete. So how did you get guys to set up their days? How'd you go about that?
Look, Tana was really heavily involved in putting together a journal, like a diary that the boys bring to training every day. And also we split the boys into groups where they can share their journal with various members of the group. So I work with the locks, Orlando works with the loose fours, etc. And so you've got a smaller group operating. It's not, you don't get lost in the numbers. They sit down and they bring the daily plans to you, looking at what their week would look like. From, as you've mentioned, from the moment you get out of bed in the morning, what does it look like as far as your prep goes before you even do your gym work? The rehab that needs to go on, or we call it prehab. The boys having to work on parts of their body that have injured, because that's usually a precursor to another injury if you don't look after those old injuries that we all pick up as we age.
What are some of the things, like you mentioned there, around prehab and physio, like that? The body is sometimes the easier stuff to do, right? Gym sessions, strength, speed, body. What about the mental preparation?
Yeah, look, we've got people come in and speak to our boys about mental prep, and there's opportunities for them to do one-on-one sessions. We've also put some of our senior players up in front, and they've given stories and spoken around how they do it, their routines. It is an area that I don't think New Zealand or Southern Hemisphere rugby does as well as possibly the big Northern Hemisphere teams, even into the American sides, where they put a lot of emphasis on the mental skills. Where I think we might have one person that comes in and delivers sessions to our boys. We've started to do that a little bit more regularly, with opportunities for them to pick up the science behind the mental strengths. But largely, it's up to the boys to pick up on those trends that are common in modern day sports, and we help them as much as we can as coaches, because we will have a part to play in that as well. I think the message is really clear around how they need to prepare every week. They get that pretty much rammed down their throat. So the mental skills side of things is a constant. I don't think you ever really nail it, because the game's constantly moving. You as an athlete are changing the whole time. What the coach wants of you is changing all the time, and being across changes and how you change it as an athlete are really crucial. So we do provide resource, but it is an area that we have to work really hard on, I think.
And one thing that when I was with the group, I came up and worked with the group December, January. So first question, any feedback there? But one of the clear things was Pacific excellence, and how that message just keep coming across. How's that been driven into the team, and how often do you talk about Pacific excellence?
Constantly. It's been largely driven by Tana. He's done a marvellous job at focusing on the excellence of those that have gone before us. I mean, not just in rugby too, it's across Pacifica in general. and we get people to come in and speak to the boys around any area that we can get our hands on, actually. And there's been some awesome role models get up in front of our group and just tell their stories.
Any examples that have been?
Savage come in and speak to the boys about his time in the UK, in the USA. That was a pretty awe-inspiring moment for the boys. You know, most of them listen to his music, and he's a big fan. And having him in the room with us was pretty special. We had David Tua come and speak to the boys about his time as an athlete leaving the islands to come to New Zealand for a better opportunity. And there's been plenty. Those stories funnel into Tana's message around excellence. You know, we are a sports team. We're obviously driven largely by Pacific Island rugby players, and we provide an opportunity for these boys to display excellence. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, not only with what we do on the field, but as you've already mentioned, the work that we do off the field as well is just as important. So we're in the community in the North Shore.
Yeah,
the boys do that really gracefully. I'm always pleasantly surprised by how keen they are to get out into the community and give back. And that's a big part of what these boys do. They're about family, they're about community, giving back, being humble, being respectful. They do that really well. And it just ties into Tana's message. And most of the men that we've had speak to the group are Pacific Island people that have gone on and done great things, but they still remain humble and true to their faith and to their culture, which is cool.
Has there been any clear messages from the speakers around risk-taking, stepping out of the comfort zone, hard work? Has there been any sort of clear messaging coming across from those speakers?
Yeah, I think David was pretty influential in talking about that. You know, at the end of his message to us, it was about winning. You know, you go through the hard work, you go through the sacrifices to leave your family behind, to go to a training environment which is going to get the best out of you. But at the end of the day, he made it quite clear that everything you do is about being better, but also winning. And that's why we play sport. And I think that's the key. You know, everything you do is about being successful, and that winning edge is created by exuding those professional habits on and off the field. Results eventually come. Sometimes it takes a while, and I think that message has been clear right from the start. You know, you got Tana up there speaking of his own story around his rise to becoming the All Black captain. You know, that's crucial. Those messages are crucial, and you got a role model who's modelling it every day.
I've been extremely impressed with Tana, and I've seen an extremely level person in every piece of media that I've seen across the season. What's your experience been? Exactly.
The vision that he brought into the team right from the start has been really clear and calculated. He wants to win just as much as anyone, but I think he returns to the big picture whenever we have a hiccup, whenever we don't perform to our best. He's quick to reset us, to remember that we're playing this for the long term. You know, rugby results come and go. You're going to win and lose. You can't define who you are just on the base of that. So his messaging around excellence and preparing every single day, getting yourself out of bed, resetting yourself, understanding we got one on the nose, we have to go again. Those messages have been really clear, and led by a really good leadership group within our team. We've got some very, very influential young men who lead this team well, and they back up his messages. So there's no grey. It's pretty clear.
There's been some success, and I'm a big believer you get what you deserve, right? And you guys, Highlanders win, Hurricanes, Crusaders, Waratahs, Drua. You've had some great wins this year, keeping things level and sort of riding those ups and downs. How have you guys implemented that? And the next part of that is you must be loving the game day experience at North Harbour, like just the vibe, the drums, the atmosphere that's created at the stadium. That must be really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, I think the region's got our North Harbour region's got right in behind us. We have such a mixture of people coming to watch us play. I think they're a bit starved the footy over in Albany. The stadium's awesome. We get to train with the Auckland FC every day. They've used to changing sheds right beside us. So when we walk onto the field, you got the FC turning right and we turn left, and we're side by side. So you've got a really competitive, or the best team in the competition, training in the same venue as you. They were talking about Albany Stadium disappearing, but now it's humming along. So we love being there. We don't get to train on the main ground as much as we'd like. We share the oval with the soccer team, but yeah, the crowd that come in, they bring their drums, they bring the Pacific culture, they make plenty of noise. The game we played against the Jura was awesome because a lot of the Fijians in Auckland obviously turned up. Some flew in, but geez, they celebrate both teams, which is what I like. They really love rugby for the purity of the game. It's same when you go to Fiji and you're playing Lautoka or Suva. If you're scoring tries, regardless of who you're playing for, they'll just celebrate the game. Anything that's special, a big tackle or a lovely try that's scored through the hands, people just get up and support that, and that's what rugby's about. Sometimes we lose that in New Zealand, don't we? We get so obsessed with the result, but we forget just to celebrate our game, because when it's played like that, it's so good to watch, and it's just a great game to be part of. I think the Pacifica people do that better than anyone.
Yeah. We give a lot of coaches listen to this podcast, and theming culture and getting that right. You've been in a lot of different teams over the years, Blues, Chiefs, London Irish. How important for you is theming, and have you got some wrong? And obviously you get some right. Like, how do you see it?
Yeah, look, if I speak about myself and theming, it's something that I didn't grow up with. I grew up playing rugby in the 70s and 80s and the late 90s. Rugby was
just get on with it.
Yeah, just get on with it. Roll your sleeves up, limp onto the field, limp off it, and have a few beers with your mates. There wasn't a lot of theming. There wasn't a lot of why do we play this game? Who are we playing this game for? Who are the sacrifices we're making for ourselves for this game? So I've been involved in lots. I mean, Tana's done a great job with the Moana Excellence, and that's something that we've really hooked into. I mean, Ren's did a really good job with the Chiefs. Basically, what he went back to was when the teams were put together in Super Rugby, they were hastily put together, not a lot of thought. There was a real energy around making Super Rugby work, but how the regions were put together wasn't really that well calculated. And so we went back and said,
speak more on this. This is new information to me. What do you mean?
I'm talking about when the Blues, the Chiefs, the Crusaders, the Hurricanes, the Highlanders were put together. The Chiefs started. We played with. They joined up with North Harbour. North Harbour were the Chiefs to start with, and so you had this region that had changed, and then the counties obviously joined in, and North Harbour went back to the Blues, and et cetera, et cetera. It had changed. So we never really had a real identity, and Ren's was big on, so when the Chiefs were put together, which region are we representing? And it was the Maori culture that we hooked into, the fact that we sit close to Tarangawawa Marae, we represent the people of that region. And we hooked into the history of this region, of the Chiefs region that we were involved in, and he did a really good job at driving that, getting people to come in and talk about the history of the region, how it was formed, not just rugby, but the whole region from going back to the historical part of how the region was discovered by the missionaries and by the army, and also the Maori influence as well. So we bound all that together, and just that was a theme that we came up with: who are we representing, what's our region about, how did it form, and then hooking into the people that were influential in driving those messages. So that was one that was done well. Like I mentioned, Tana's already done it really well, and Leon did some similar stuff with the Blues region when we were there. So it is quite a common thing to do now. Takes a bit of time. You have to be pretty clear around how it's going to work, who you're going to get to help deliver the information, and obviously the key thing is keep going back to it, reverting back to it when times are tough. How does the theme relate to a sports team when you're playing games for 80 minutes? You have to live it. You have to be part of it. And so that's a big part of some of the themes that I've been involved with. I know the Crusaders had a really big focus on their theme when they first started, and that was largely to do with Wayne Smith and his crew.
And that takes me into your time with Samoa. So you've spent over a decade with that team, with that squad. Just in reflections, like when you from when you first joined, like what's changed? How have you enjoyed it? What's been challenging? And where have they got to?
Yeah, look, I joined Samoa in 2010. I got a message from Dickie and Ozzy, who are currently involved, Ozzy McLean, who was currently involved with Samoan Rugby, and I just started my journey as an NPC coach with the Hawke's Bay Magpies. So I gratefully took up the opportunity to go and be involved with the international team. And I was really lucky when I went to Samoa. They were full of professional athletes from all around the globe. You know, guys at their very best. They're playing some pretty good rugby. And we caught a few teams on the hop, actually. I think, people looked at Samoa and thinking, well, we're just a little Pacific Island nation, but geez, we had some seriously good firepower.
Was there not the restrictions from like French clubs and challenging?
Yeah, there'd always been those restrictions were there, but the boys were, I suppose, at the stages of their career where they choose to want to play for the islands rather than spend a pre-season playing for Toulouse or the London Irish, where, for example, Salella came from. They were through and through Samoan reps. They wanted to play. They wanted to sacrifice. And there was always a little bit of pressure on them not to. That's always been a challenge. You're making a pretty good living playing for those professional clubs in Europe. They want you to be there all the time. They want to get every inch of every part of the contract out of you. They don't want you disappearing and possibly getting injured playing another program of work away from them. And they do make it difficult. They did make it difficult to start with, but I think in the end, when they line up the passion for the jersey or choosing to stay for their clubs, they choose to play for the nations every time. So that's always been a challenge, and it still is to this day. The windows don't always line up. For example, you've got the Pacific Nations Cup coming up as soon as Super Rugby finishes, and guys will have NPC contracts to honour as well. So they'll leave those behind, and then to have to go and join into a Pacific Island team, which doesn't really pay the same amount of money as you would with a contract with an NPC team. So they're always making those sacrifices. They're always jostling around for, is this going to keep my family healthy? Is it going to keep money coming into the coffers? So those challenges have been there forever. The World Cup year is easier. I think every 4 years you'll probably get your best then making a decision, but from year to year, it fluctuates.
And quite often you're heading in there, you've got new players, strong cultures, strong family connection, so that trust needs to be built. How do you go about building that rapport with new players?
I think the key is you got to build relationships with all your players. Take your time to know where they come from, what it is that drives them, their experiences that they've come from. I always start with, what school did you go to? Who was the influences you had at school? Who were your coaches? Who was your key person in your life that started you along? And 9 times out of 10, it'll come back to mum and dad or family. Mm-hmm. And then they might pick one or two people that have had a big influence on them that you might even know, because I've been around a long time and I can usually find a connection back to someone or somebody that had an influence over them as young men. And I think that's the key, because when they know that you care about what they're doing, that you take an interest in what they've done, it makes it easier when you tap them on the shoulder and you said, look, I need to have a chat to you about something you're not doing well enough, or I'm going to challenge you on a couple of things. If they know you care first and foremost, then the messaging that around helping them is usually, well, this person's coming from an angle of wanting to make me better, rather than just tapping them on the shoulder. You've never said a word to them and saying, "Look, I need this to be done better." It's just not as effective in my mind if you haven't built a relationship with them, because you're probably going to know how they're going to respond anyway. Based on the discussion that you've had with them, and just knowing them a little bit better than just being a rugby player.
Yeah, and when you've gone from Super Rugby environment in New Zealand into this Samoa team, how have you sort of balanced all the other factors, tradition, family, messaging, different?
I'm the parling. I'm the guy that goes in and probably tries to bring some of the knowledge around the game. I respect the culture immensely. Look, it's been really good for me going into a team environment that has a big religious or Christian emphasis. We pisi loto in the morning. We say a prayer. It can only be a good thing for anyone to go into an environment like that and experience that culture that possibly you've missed out on or you've forgotten about. For me, it's something new. I wasn't someone that went to church. My mum used to take us when we were kids, but as I got older, I chose not to go. And then suddenly you go back into an environment where it's part of what we do. And you learn to sing. You learn to sing along. The boys can sing. They love singing. They love being involved with getting up in front of the group and having a message for the day. Usually a reading from the Bible. That sort of stuff is you can't go wrong with it. It's good for you. So that's been good. So you just got to respect the culture. And they all have there's a different slant. The Pacific Island boys, the Tongans, the Samoans, the Fijians, they all have a different slant on things, and they all deliver it a little bit differently. But the message is the same, and that's key. With the Samoan team, I go in there. I tick along. I try not to trip over anyone and get in the way of what they're doing. That sort of stuff. I'm sort of there for as much as I can deliver around the rugby knowledge and help them get better in those areas. They'll pick my brains on some stuff, and I'll offer some suggestions around what we could do to be better. And I think that's my style. It's not about going in there all guns blazing. I just creep in there and settle in and do the best I can probably from behind rather than at the front leading.
Yeah. And I think that's where you're world class, is your ability to not come in, as you say, guns blazing and the big voice at the front and trying to dominate an environment. You come from a place of care. I know the teacher background, not all teachers would make good rugby coaches, but I respect the skill set of teachers and what they learn and what they bring across. What's been the biggest things that you've taken from that into your coaching?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a physical education teacher. I spent, my 20 years teaching physical education before I even...
Yeah. Wow.
When I was coaching rugby the whole time, but my main emphasis was, what I did in the classroom. So I take a lot of that with me. I try and create a learning environment. I think the key is it doesn't really matter what you know. I try and emphasize it's about how I can share what I know so that I can help you be better. And that's the same for any good teacher. It's about empowering others to be better. In a sports team, when you're moving quite quickly, the stand up in front and lecture style, long gone. And that's, as I mentioned it earlier, that's what I grew up with. And you'd sit in a room thinking you'd have questions that you'd probably never asked because you were never invited to. But I think if you can create an environment where it's okay to let guys lead, make mistakes, adjust, put an arm around them sometimes give them a bit of a kick. That's my style. That's what I think is key. You got to be learning every day. No one's perfect. We make mistakes. We get better by making mistakes. You have to make mistakes to get better.
I'm interested in the skill, like the 20 years in the classroom. You would have seen the naughty kid, the kid that isn't learning, the showman, the jokester. You must see things in team rugby meetings or questions or the quiet guy. Have you got any examples where you've had a really good win or good impact that you've been able to see and say, oh, yeah, I recognise that. I'm going to attack that?
You see that sort of stuff all the time, Peter.
If you're looking for it.
Yeah, I think to see it, you got to sit back. And sometimes, as you've mentioned, being at the back of the room rather than at the front, because when you're at the front of the room, you miss some of the nuances, the interactions, the guys that are struggling. You know, you can see the guys that's just waiting for the meeting to finish. You can see the guys that are engaged at the front. Soaks does a really good thing. He gets the guys to get up and move around the room as soon as he's finished speaking. So if I've had a turn at the front and it's his turn, the first thing we'll do is just shift everyone from sitting in the position beside someone that they always sit beside. So go and just basically change the environment. Most guys will take in about the first 3 or 4 minutes of what you're about to say, and then the rest of it just becomes a big cloud. And so he understands that by just changing the environment, changing where you're sitting, changing who you're sitting beside, for example, as a way of recapturing and resetting them, because he's about to talk. I've got about 4 or 5 minutes of whatever I'm going to say to sink in, and then the rest of it we'll send out on a WhatsApp message or something. You'll get a message with all that information on it anyway. So we try and use a wide range of teaching strategies. We use group work. We get the players up in front to deliver, which has been really successful. You might capture the guys who possibly are shy in a smaller group to get up in front and to offer that for them later once they've gained a bit of confidence. What else do we do? We have like I said, we have coaches who work with position-specific groups. That's been really successful. You get then to implore that the guys who sit back to come forward, put probably emphasis on them to be present in those groups. What else do? We do lots of things. We do quizzes. One of our analysts is awesome at putting together a quiz, and that quiz is all about the knowledge that they need to have, the language of our team, the language of our drills, the language of our strategy on the field. And they'll get ranked out of 10 or 20, and some of them get it wrong.
Why is it important? Why, if a player said to you, mate, just leave me alone, I'll do my thing on the field. Like, this stuff doesn't matter. Why do you think it's important to someone to learn how to speak, have an input, to be able to understand all the stuff you've just explained? Like, why does it matter?
It matters because you're part of a team, and I think for your mind to change around how I drive this team forward rather than me being told to drive the team forward is totally different. And you need to communicate on the field when you're under pressure every single time. So if you're shy, if you have something to say, if you're you might be a lock that's put into a group around organising the line out and having an emphasis on changing the course of the game because what we're doing hasn't worked. I've got to be able to think positively, creatively, come up with a solution, give it to the team in a 15-second message, and then move on. And it's all about messaging and getting a solution to a problem and moving on. If we don't create solution-focused men, then we'll get to full time. The game's over. We've made 5 mistakes that could have been fixed on the run. Because, what we do as coaches is hugely overstated. We're watching the game just like that. We can maybe have an influence at half time. For 5 minutes, we might change the course of the tactics, but good rugby teams that I've been involved with, they can do that in a heartbeat. You can change the course of what you're doing. Shivers, we've planned for A, but we need to be at B and C now. What we've decided, they've worked out. The analysis work that teams do on you is massive. And if you think you're going to go into a game and everything's going to go to plan, then you're grossly mistaken. And if we have guys that are just robots, they just won't be able to think for themselves because you haven't created an environment where they have to. And that's the key to sport in general. I think all the great sports teams that have gone before us, not just rugby, they've been driven by good leadership, on-field leadership, and good lieutenants who have been able to help that captain or that coach move that team forward. And you get the All Blacks are probably arguably the best in the world at it. They've been world champions or top of the game for over 100 years. If they're not number one, they're 2 or 3. For a team to hold that that sort of status is it's fantastic, and other teams hold the All Blacks up in the highest regard because of their ability to be excellent always. And if you can get a team to be contributing to their development and helping drive the team forward, then you're on the right steer in my mind.
Outstanding answer. I couldn't agree more. I remember when I was coming through the Otago Academy, Ian Arthur, Academy manager, Pete, you need to talk more. Got to talk more. Need you to talk more on the field. I need you to talk more. And then Ben Smith must have had a week off from the All Blacks, and he came to training and trained, and I just witnessed an superior, excellent communicator on the field. And I was like, right, that's what talk more looks like, sounds like, and I can emulate that. So I couldn't agree more. As a light bulb moment for me. So I want to ask you about your NZ20s. Can you just explain how many seasons you spent with them and some of the tournaments and the success that you went through with them?
Yeah, look, I was only a young coach when I was involved with the 20s. It was helping Renz and Dave Rennie out with the team. I was working with New Zealand Rugby Union quite closely. That's when the New Zealand 20s used to assemble down in Palmerston North, and I was one of the resource coaches, and then earmarked to help move on once Renz decided that he was going to finish off. So I wasn't the leader of that program. I was part of that program. I thought it was marvellous how the New Zealand 20s ran in Palmy, and it was a central base. We used to end up at the Rugby Institute, and all the NPC coaches from all around the country would be involved in making that team better.
What year was this?
Shivers. This was 2010, 2011, 2012. But that was Bowden's era. Brodie Retallick, those sorts of boys come out of that program, and it was just set up beautifully. I mean, the leaders, for example, would go out with Renz on a tramp, an overnight tramp. We were hooked into OPC, and I remember Renz saying to me one day when he came back with some of his leaders that was arguably one of the better things that he'd seen done in a sports environment, was to take these boys out into the bush. They had to do a couple of overnight camps and just fend for themselves, basically. And the leadership qualities that some of them exuded in that environment were, as he said, he could have named his team based on some of the things that he observed on those couple of nights out in the bush. We had all the resource coaches coming to us from around the country. The feedback the boys were getting was first class. The trialling system, we had the best 2 teams in the country, or 4 teams actually. We picked enough for 4 teams there, and they'd be sent away, and then the coaching staff would catch up with them, would fly into their regions, sit down with the players, review some of their footage with them. It was high quality, and it was no surprises that some of the players that came out of that program went on to be world class, and some of them are still playing to this day. And that was where it all started.
Why have we changed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure why they've changed. Arguably, it's financial. To fly everyone into that region was always quite a big thing. A lot of coaches having to fly and travel into that area. But it was definitely a blueprint for success in my mind. You could argue that maybe we need to put a bit more emphasis onto a program like that. We have the under-20s program in Taupo now, which has been pretty successful. But I know that a lot of the development of those boys is left up to the Super Rugby teams, and they take those boys under their wings and then release them off with a few of the other members of the franchise into those sides to play in the tournament. So it's been done differently. I know, for example, the French, they assemble their under-20s team to train against the top French team. So whenever the top French team assembles, the best boys in the game and in France end up playing and training against them. They're
so smart.
They're the tackle bodies.
Mm.
And that's really successful, and they've, I think, taken a big step forward in the way they develop their players.
Well, that literally creates the thing that Ben Smith did for me when I had that moment of realization of wow, if the French 20s are training against the French top side, wow, that's happening right across the group. And no wonder, I remember there was a stat that came out about players that had played New Zealand 20s through this era kicking on to Super Rugby contracts, like it was high 90%. And no wonder with the rugby experience that they were getting, right? Your passion for building men and building young men through, that's something that's important to you?
Yeah, hugely. Yeah. I think that's invariably my job. It's to help them develop and become the best they can be. Sometimes they don't even know how good they can be, Peter. Sometimes you need to tell them, take them aside. And when you see stuff that they do well and you think, man, he's on the right track, they need to know, and they need to know quickly. Sometimes we see it and we don't always communicate it. I think that the art is when you're coaching someone to do what you want them to do, or do something that they need to do to be better. The key is how quickly you give the feedback and how you give it to them. I don't think you can ever move away from just praise, as much praise as you can give. I mean, human beings thrive on it. We're often quick to find all the things they can't do, but man, if you have a different focus around all the things they can do. So you might be 5 things that they're doing really well, and it might be just one little thing that you pick on, rather than pick on 5 things they can't do and talk to them about the one thing they're good at. I think you should always focus on praising them, and when you see something, so you can find a light bulb moment for them. Geez, that's the standard. You need to do that every single time. Then you're on the right track. And I haven't always been that person. I didn't always used to coach like that. It was often, I was growled at when I was at school. If you got growled at, you got growled at to get better. Someone used to be on the sideline, your coach would be on the sideline. I was lucky enough to, come across some coaches that did things a little bit differently, and I thought, well, that's a bit different when someone's actually praising you and giving you a bit of a boost rather than giving you a clip around the ear.
Have you seen much difference, boys, 20s boys in the 90s, early 2000s coming through now? We always talk about all the different factors with the world at the moment. What's the 20-year-old like at the moment? Down on self-confidence or the opposite?
Yeah, it's a good point. I make judgments around that sort of stuff all the time. I know, I've got children the same age as most of the guys I coach, and everything's externally referenced now, Peter. So, we talk about social media and the phones, their access to information. It's done in a heartbeat. But it's always criticism. They'll get as soon as the game is over, instantly they're looking for some gratification from anybody. So they'll stroll through their comments. They take some of that stuff to heart, rather than sitting beside me or be beside their teammate and having a beer with them and putting their phone in their bag. It's phones out. It's when you externally reference, you don't know who's saying what about you. That frustrates me. But I'm just showing my age group. I don't think you'll ever change that. You're talking about schools now trying to get rid of phones and slowing down the amount of social media that these kids are on. Some of them are on their phones constantly. It can't be good for your self-esteem when you're being judged and you by somebody you don't even know.
Can you speak more to externally reference? I've never heard it phrased that way, but putting it that way is much better than saying, hey, put your phone down. Like explaining to someone what external reference is.
It means that you're being influenced by somebody from outside your realm. So somebody that influences you that you don't know anything about. It's external. It's away from you, rather than being internally referenced. It's being sure of yourself, having good systems, having good pro habits, being confident that what you're doing doesn't need somebody else to have an influence. I might have a mentor or a coach that I respect, or a senior player, but that's enough. You don't need to have the world telling you how to play rugby or how to play sport. You don't need that stuff. So being internally referenced, being really confident about yourself, being able to fulfill a day without having to scroll through your phone to find something to look at. It's, those moments don't help you with learning. And I know with teachers at the moment, kids, it's hard for the teachers to get kids to focus in on what they need to do in a classroom, because they'd rather be flicking their through the reels on their phone and looking at things that are gone in a heartbeat and have no bearing on them as young kids. So I think that's the key. Being sure of yourself and the people around you and the influences that you can have that are going to make a positive aspect on your life without having to refer to somebody else.
Outstanding. Your circle, your group, your mentors, who's in that?
You mentioned it right at the start. I enjoy our environment, so I tend to have pretty good relationships with the people I work with, so the coaching staff that we're with at the moment. Over my course of my lifetime, I've been influenced by some cool people. When I was at school, all I wanted to do was be a phys teacher. So my rowing coach, my rugby coach, was a guy called Glenn Ross. I thought he was he was pretty influential. He was something that I thought to myself, shivers, I wouldn't mind being a phys ed teacher. This guy's helping with my rowing. He's helping with my rugby. That was all I wanted to do, was to leave school and go down to Target and become a phys ed teacher. I was lucky enough to come across Gordy Hunter when I was down there. So Gordy was one of my club coaches, and he was totally different than any coach I'd ever. The people who know Gordy are listening to me will know exactly what I'm talking about. I was coached by Laurie Mains, and Laurie and Gordy were opposite ends of the spectrum. They both coached the Targa, but Gordy was all about the team, about the person, about the culture. Wasn't a great rugby tactician, but it didn't matter, because he was all about you guys working this out. I'm just going to back you to the hilt. And if anyone stepped out of the realm of being a good team person, Gordy would jump on you quickly. So he didn't rant and rave. He was up in front of the team, but it was about the team. It wasn't about rugby. It was about how you could help this team move forward, about personalities, about getting to know people. And I liked that. I liked that a lot. And he left a lot of the decision making. I was the captain of Varsity A at the time. He left that up to me. It was a huge responsibility, which I'd never taken on before, but I was grateful for the opportunity to be a leader under his wing. And he expected us to lead. He expected the leaders to get up in front of the team and to drive standards and to drive all that stuff. But he had a huge impact. And then once I got a little bit older, I ended up going back home, and I was influenced by a guy called Kev Green, and Kevin and Farrell Tomato, the late Farrell Tomato, they were big on the team taking total control. We had some big personalities who had been together for 10 years, and they stepped out of being at the front. They weren't in front of us very often. They was about, you guys, you got to lead this team, boys. You've been together so long. You've got, you know what makes this team tick. And we evolved. That was my years with Waikato. We evolved into a pretty strong team, strong personalities. We didn't stay together very long, because I don't think we were we're probably at the end of our tether. But those.
How do you something that just came into my head there? How many years have you been coaching for professionally?
Professionally, only since 2007. I've been coaching a rugby team every year since 1997.
Wow.
Or 87, I should say, sorry.
So my pushback is, so you've got that experience. You're obviously a very good forwards coach. You've seen every line out. You've seen every scrum. And you're trying to get someone in your forward pack to lead and have an opinion and make decisions. Like, well, Tom, I don't know as much as what you do. Like, what if my decision's wrong? How do I'm not confident with this. So how do you actually get someone to lead and make decisions and feel confident about it?
Get out of their way. Look, I sit in a group at work at the moment with Moana Pasifika with some very influential players. For example, I work with Tom Savage every day. Tom Savage has played over 150-odd games in the English Premiership for Gloucester. He's played... Yeah. People don't know that. I mean, he's He's a legend at Gloucester. He's left Gloucester to go and play in Suntory in Japan, and now he's with us. And the amount of knowledge he has in his head is worth bottling. And not only does he help immensely with our line out, but he's influenced others in our group. You got Sam Slade in there, who's an international lock forward who plays. He's played a lot of rugby for Samoa. You got Alan Craig, who's just a young fellow coming out of Northland. He's learned a lot from Tom as well. So we work together in a group. I sit there as one of the members of the group, and I lead that group. But the information that those guys bring to the table is valuable. So I have that consultative approach to putting stuff together, largely working with those boys in that sort of sense.
Sorry, back to your mentors. And were you any good at rowing?
Yeah, well, rowing was probably where I started, actually. All my family rowed. So we were at school. We were heavily influenced by my dad, who said, when you go to school, make sure you row. It's good for you. And so we got, and he was right. Sometimes biking to rowing at 5 o'clock in the morning, I was wondering whether that information and that piece of advice was good. But rowing was good for our family. My brother Bill probably was the one that persevered with it. He probably loved rugby more than he liked rowing. He's probably more of a rugby head than I was, and my other brothers were. But so I'm the oldest of four. And Bill went to a couple of Olympics. He went to Barcelona and Seoul. He was a great oarsman. He rowed through pretty impressive time with New Zealand rowing. I rowed all the way through to my first year at university, and Richard, my brother, rowed for New Zealand at age group, and he chased the leather ball as well. And my youngest brother Jamie, he rowed through school as well, and he lives in Japan now. But he was heavily influenced by the rowing when we were growing up. And I think about the lessons I learned on a rowboat, about hanging in there, being tough, working as a team, what your body can actually go through were valuable lessons. I don't think I ever would have learned some of those lessons just on the rugby field. And other people have experiences around another sport that they played that influenced their rugby as well. But I think rowing goes hand in hand. The fitness levels you get are immense. I remember turning up to varsity A trials in Dunedin after a year rowing for Waikato, and geez, I was fit. I used to move around the field in those first 3 or 4 months of rugby before it caught up with you. But the fitness levels that we went with were outstanding. And I used to feel so advantaged by the fact that I just got out of a rowboat and had a full rowing season under my belt.
We're so lucky in this country. Like all the greats, they had a crack at basketball. They might have played some cricket. They did some golf growing up, or they threw the shot put for a couple of seasons. Like, I think we have to protect that in New Zealand, and in these high performance academies starting super early is detrimental. Back to the rowboat, we had a discussion around every stroke. Is that what you call it? Every stroke matters. You feel it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's come into your scrum coaching.
Yeah, the lessons are huge. Everything does matter. If you talk about a scrum, you have 8 minds all working in one direction. Everyone has a particular role to play. If someone's not quite there, if they miss their role, if a loose forward doesn't quite have a shoulder in the right place, or we miss the hit together into the scrum, then it doesn't work as well as if you've got 8 minds all focused on the same thing. And you learn that lesson, like you said, in a rowboat. We were told at length, don't ever look out of the rowboat. Don't lose your focus on your crew that's in front of you. Every stroke does matter. I lost a Māori Cup by a canvas, which is one stroke, one year. And somewhere along the line, one of us, or not all of us, would have looked out of the boat a couple of times. So discipline is key, and you learn that the hard way sometimes. Our coach was adamant that he would be able to tell who had looked out of the boat just by the way the boat was moving up the river or up the lake, and yeah, the small things do matter, and being able to find that discipline in a rowboat or on a rugby field is key.
Young guy coming through, he's working on his game. He's absolutely loving it. What would be as they turn up to maybe getting picked into a professional academy, like a Super Rugby academy, what would be some of the crucial things you'd recommend just having dialed in? Let's talk about a front rower.
First thing I think they need to do is have a real clear understanding of what they're about. So knowing yourself first and foremost, and sometimes that takes a little bit of advice from somebody else or a conversation with someone. If you're lucky enough to have a coach who will sit down and work with you around that, what your weaknesses are as an athlete, what your strengths are, and then putting some good programs around you both off and on the field. So the first thing I would look at is his strength from a propping perspective, because it takes a long time for a young prop to be confident enough to be able to be sure of himself every single scrum. You're going to get some hidings. You're going to get beaten, and making them understand that is key. That you're not going to win every scrum. That you're probably going to come up against a prop who's a lot older than you, a lot more experienced than you. And how are you going to deal with this as a person? Is this going to set you back, or is this just an opportunity for you to get better? And invariably, the gym is where you learn a lot of the strength building stuff, the intrinsic stuff around your neck, your shoulders, your core. All that stuff is really key. Just being strong, being able to squat and bench press isn't probably enough. A really good trainer nowadays will help a young prop get better by adding some real detail to the scrummaging technique. So a coach, you're strong, but where are we going to go to from here? What's the next step? Obviously, you're going to have to keep your weight high, and some of you might have to change your body shape. The changing your body shape that you've had for a long period of time is quite tough for some guys, because you're going to have to eat more. You're going to have to train hard. You're going to have to lift heavy weights, which might have a bearing on how you move around the field. Suddenly you feel sluggish because you're carrying another 10, 15 kilograms. If you put that on too quickly, is it going to have a bearing on how you move and how you play? So that might be a gradual approach to, we probably need you to be over 120 Ks. At the moment, you're 112. All right, we're going to put 8K on you. How quick is that going to happen? You're going to get heavier just by growing and maturing without me having to do all that. Put that 8K on you immediately. So it might be a process around doing that over a year or so, so that you can develop your strength and in line with your fitness levels, your aerobic fitness levels.
Any trends that are commonly apparent at the moment? Lack of neck strength, ankle mobility. Any trends that you're seeing that the group coming through at the moment?
I think for props, it's the isometric pressure that you get largely by scrummaging against each other, and arguably a scrum machine. I know not everyone's a fan of machines, but being able to hold pressure without movement is really is the hard thing. I remember I heard a great quote a long time ago: be comfortable being uncomfortable. In other words, if you get yourself in a position where you're not in the ideal pushing position, and you've been hit into that position by your locks and your loose forwards, stay there. Bite through the mouth guard, acknowledge in your mind, I'm not in the best position. If I move, I'm gonna stuff up the whole scrum for everyone else. We just need the ball in and out. I'm not going to be able to dominate this guy because he's in a position that if I adjust, he's probably going to get one over me. And being in an uncomfortable position for 8-9 seconds can be a tough gig for anyone. But I think that was a really, insightful piece of information to me. No, I was never a front rower, but he was pretty influential in his message, because he could influence the whole scrum just by trying to adjust his feet or adjust his head position or adjust his shoulder so that he could be comfortable, but invariably it affected everyone else. So, but it takes time to understand your body in those situations. It takes time. It takes getting beaten. How do I stop this guy beating me in that particular that spot every time? How am I going to work that out? And you work that out as a front row. Sometimes you've got a really good hooker. Sometimes you just have to work that stuff out yourself.
Outstanding. Couple more questions to go. Best personal development experience that wasn't rugby?
I was lucky enough when I was with Hawke's Bay to do some PD, and I invited myself to the Collingwood Magpies when they were coached by a guy called Mick Malthus, and so the Australian football team. And then at the end of that week, I also invited myself to the Melbourne Storm. Bellamy was coaching them at the height of their game. It's when Billy Slater and Cooper Cronk and those guys were at their peak. And you mentioned communication, and I went and watched the Storm do their captain's run on a Friday afternoon, and I saw Billy Slater running that team by himself. He was loud and noisy. Cooper Cronk was loud and noisy. Bellamy, who's, as we know, is a bit of a tyrant, he just stood on the sideline and let the players get on with it. And they went hard for about 15 minutes. This is the eve of a match. This is their captain's run. I've never seen anything like it. But those two men were in control of that team for that 15 minutes. They didn't let anyone off the hook, and they had to nail all their plays, and they did it at full speed. We do a captain's run now. Sometimes we just back off the intensity or back off the time frame. These guys were going hard. And I know this was back in 2007, but I learned a lot about the communication, the leaders taking control. As we get closer to the game day, it's less about the coach, it's more about the senior players. And I saw two of the very best leagueies in that environment. And then Mick Malthouse was a bit different. His philosophy around coaching was everything feeds up to me. They were really ahead of their time with what they call the daily readiness to train. So when the boys arrived at the Melbourne training ground, they all had to sign in on an iPad. They had to let. Well, there was 5 questions: how'd you sleep? Muscle soreness. How are you feeling from a training perspective? I can't remember the other 2 questions, but they had to log onto this iPad, and it shot off the messages to all the departments. So if someone arrived at work and they hadn't slept well, you would get a tap on the shoulder from the team doctor or the physio around, why didn't you sleep well? The nutritionist might have been brought in. You didn't eat well enough, or what's the thing that's stopping you from sleeping? If you got a baby at home that's keeping you awake at night, are you stressed about something? Blah blah blah, and all that information instantly got compiled and then sent to Mick, and he knew within half an hour of those guys signing in that all these athletes were in relationship to his training program. Can I train the best out of this guy that's just got out of bed and he's only had 4 hours sleep? Is he going to be injured, or is he an injury risk if we put him on the grass and train as we're about to? And so he had all that information. It was like all going on at once, but it was all concise down to a very small piece of information that he gathered at the end of the morning, and he had it all. And we're doing that now in rugby, but that was nearly 20 years ago, and they were ahead of the game. And there's no surprises that they were winning titles at that stage. And he was pretty influential on making sure he knew what everybody in that team was going through. In a nutshell, he could have a real good feel on how things were going to go, just based on the information he was gathering.
That information gathering, interesting to hear that you guys are doing it. I push back a little bit on it because I find those questions negative.
Yeah.
So I think all information is important and has a time and place, 100%. But I just wonder whether what's your muscle soreness? Well, before you asked it, I actually hadn't even thought about how I was feeling like. Where do you sit with, mate, turn up, do your job. You're a professional. Like, this is you day in, day out, and that side of things.
I'm like you. I'm like you. I'd just like them to come to work and just get on with it. If you're tired, train tired. If you didn't get any sleep, bad luck, just get on with it. But what we're talking about, if for example, if athletes get less sleep than they're used to, they become an injury risk. And when you've got a squad like we have of just over 30, we can't afford to have guys getting injured at training. It's just, if we can use a piece of information to help us manage an athlete through a day, then why not? And so the old me would have said, just get on with it. And he'd put a hamstring. And I'll go, oh, shit, I knew he didn't get any bloody sleep last night. He's tired. He's probably 20% off his best. And we've just pushed him to do a test that maybe it's going to hurt him. So I think as we use information, I agree with you. It's about how much. And sometimes you just got to use it as a tool. If you think maybe this guy just needs to harden up and get on with this, then you need to use that message as well. And I think it's just a agglomeration of everything. You know the athlete. If you've formed a relationship with them, you can probably put your arm around him and say, "You ready to go today?" If he gives you a bit of a, you probably, I know when he gives me a, maybe he's out. So
it's a trust thing.
It's a trust.
Empathy, compassion are a real thing, so that all comes into it. I do want to ask you, because you've seen a lot. Anything in Super Rugby? I know you love your mauls and your scrums, 8, 2, 3, 4. Is there anything that you've seen this season you were like, oh, that's interesting, or that's leading and that's creative? Any trends in the game that are having an effect that you're exploiting or having a crack at?
What's changed? There's been plenty of change. I've seen the game change immensely, for the better mainly. I really enjoy, now that the game's really focused on a lot of kicking. The kicking game has become a really important part of the game now, isn't it? The teams that kick well and kick often, and also have a plan around how you get the ball back once you've kicked it. I think that's become a big emphasis in the modern day game, largely influenced by, I think, how South Africa play, where they are real field position based, put high balls up and they go back and get the ball. So either in the air, and if you can win the ball in the air, then that's A+. But now that there's no more, I think this has been good for the game. Now that there's no more, what's the word? We used to call them escorts. People getting in front of the catcher so that you can't challenge for the ball. That's gone now. There's open lanes now where you put a ball up, you can go back and you can challenge for it. So there's not as much collateral damage in front of the ball, in front of the catcher. So you get a free opportunity to challenge for possession. But if you can't challenge for it in the air and the ball goes down, and you can put a tack and you can pick up the scraps, then you have a plan around how we get the ball back. Who's chasing the ball? Who's going to look for the opportunities to play off the scraps? Vice versa, if he does catch the ball and you can't challenge in the air, what are we going to do when we knock him over? Often it's, do I bend down and try and pick the ball up? But I know you and I have spoken about this before. Do I just move past the ball, old school, to step over the ball and leave the ball alone, leave the ball for the next person? So counter-ruck, basically on the edge of the field. So that's been a big change, and I think it's been good for the game. But you need to have strategies around how you go and get the ball back now. I think that, and the good teams know just how to do that.
Yeah. Actually had a good discussion with Ben Smith from the Highlanders, who spoke about their kicking game against Moana. And in most conversations I have is not because I enjoy the kicking side of the game, but it is around the kicking strat and chase lines and the turnover, how we're going to get the turnover. The arm wrestle that is rugby is the kicking game at the moment, along with all the other important stuff. Last question, Joe Coventry. He's been with Rugby Bricks for a while. It's been great to see his growth. What have you seen? How have you seen the growth of Joe Coventry over the last 5 years?
So Joe, my son, he loves working for Rugby Bricks. I think he was happy to sit back and listen and learn and be influenced by you and Kale. So I think he's come a long way. He's opened up. He's obviously got more mature. I'm pretty sure he offers a bit more, has an influence in your business and where it's going.
He does.
And he's obviously moved out of home. Living with his girlfriend in Tauranga, and he's a different person, but he's maturing. He's got to a stage where he's learned a lot as your business has developed, and I think he feels like he can contribute to where you're heading.
Yeah, no, Joe's been fantastic for us, and definitely cut from the same cloth. I tell you what, I actually love it. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for today. Thanks for jumping on. I absolutely love the skill set of teaching, building humans, rapport, all the soft skills, and I think that's somewhere where you're absolutely world class. So thanks for sharing all the stuff that you did when I was up, and also doing this podcast, because it's truly insightful and helpful. So thanks.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me along.
And when you're finished with that, I suppose you're gonna fly, huh?